Welcome back to the Sapio. This is Buck Joffrey here. I'm here with my good friend and colleague and my doctor, Dr. Alan Viglione from Montecito Concierge Medicine. Alan's been on the show many times. He is a cutting edge medicine 3.0 type who we've talked about before, and good friend and a smart guy. So Alan,
Thanks, buddy.
welcome back, man.
Gosh, it's always good to be here. I
Yeah.
feel like it's been forever.
I know. It's
Right?
just we've been I haven't seen you in a long time.
I know.
I think you've been working out, and you look buff. You know.
Yeah, it's sort of the post-breakup single man attitude, right? Just go to the gym, go to the gym, go to the gym.
Yeah, nice.
That's right.
Nice,
I know.
nice. Yeah,
That's not a plug, by the way.
No, I know. Well, I'm single too. I can't say I was actually doing other things, but
I know.
you were actually, but you're getting in shape. You're sort of
No, yeah.
preparing and
Yeah, I'm trying, man.
yeah.
Medicine 3.0, survival, health span. You do have to, I mean,
Yeah.
no joking aside though, like you have to live it, you have to embrace it.
Yeah.
And it actually is kind of good to actually practice what we preach.
Yeah. And I got to tell you that one thing that happened to me, and I don't know, because I know I was married for a number of years, and you were in a relationship for a number of years. And
Yep.
one thing that happens, and I think it happens to a lot of people, for better or for worse, you get comfortable, right? And then the years start
100%.
ticking.
Faster and faster.
And all of a sudden you're just like, you wake up and you're like, 5 or 10 years older, and you're out of shape, and you're like, why didn't somebody tell me that?
I know.
Why didn't I?
know.
Because you get too comfortable, right?
That's right.
And so one of the silver linings to these kinds of things, sometimes these breakups or whatever,
Yeah.
is sort of an awakening to realize where you're at in your own physical
right.
life.
That's right.
Right? Because there's
Yeah.
a vanity element there, but with vanity comes all of these other health issues that,
100%.
right.
That's right. I mean, and health tends to trail behind vanity, with some exceptions, of course. So you
Yeah.
can look good and be unhealthy.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I mean, it's sort of like an internal Oura ring in a sense. Although nowadays there's no excuse. I mean, if your health starts declining, we have all these little cues that should kick us in the butt. But you're right.
Yeah.
We get complacent.
Yeah. Well, we have some questions today, some interesting discussions, and let's just get started with that. One of the questions that I got, that I've kind of compiled these. I don't even know who said what, but effectively, I think it's a very fair question, and a question that comes up. I think it's sort of a nebulous answer in the literature. Is moderate consumption of alcohol good for you, or is it bad for you? So what's your take on this?
Wow. Yeah, good question. I will say that my understanding of alcohol and physiology has changed over the last few years. So if you asked me this question 5 years ago, or residency or medical school, probably would have said something different. I was under the understanding of this sort of J curve phenomena. Have 1 or 2 glasses of wine, right? You get the protective benefits, you get the antioxidants.
By the way, that initial thing was because of the whole the French paradox, right? How is it that these French drink wine every day and eat cheese, but don't end up with a lot of cardiovascular disease? So that's
100%.
really kind of brought this.
Yeah, when you look at patterns of the centenarians,
Right.
or of some of these other cultures. Unfortunately, though, there are so many confounders wrapped into that.
Yeah, that's right.
But just to answer your question succinctly, I don't think that there's an amount of alcohol. Honestly, I mean, once we start getting to higher numbers, above 1 or 2 drinks per day, then you start running risk of NASH, alcohol, so hepatic steatosis, fatty liver, and then, God forbid, higher probability of cirrhosis.
Yeah.
But I think, it'd be a stretch to say that any alcohol provides value.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, there's a couple. So this was stirred on by, I think there was a couple of different retrospective articles. They were completely observational. I think there was one in 2017, British Medical Journal, and then also later and earlier than that in the Lancet in 2015, which were basically suggesting that there may be some initial benefit from moderate. And it's tough because what is moderate anyway? I'm not even sure what that is, from a cardiovascular perspective. And the idea was that, maybe there was some some anti-inflammatory, and these are wine primarily, right?
Right.
Red wine. That there was some anti-inflammatory benefits from, from some of the chemicals that are in there, maybe the polyphenols, the resveratrol,
Right.
and that kind of thing. But I think that since then, though, that there's really been, I think most people have backed off on that idea that there's actually a real benefit.
Yeah.
That there's like something that's really positive about drinking.
I think you're spot on.
And so I would say that, the larger article, I think there was a larger study that came out a little bit after that, and I don't remember exactly when that was, but it essentially looked at, looked at these cohorts, and I think essentially what you were saying, there's a lot of confounding factors. When people out there drinking moderately, maybe they're more social, maybe they're more active, maybe, those kinds of things, as opposed to, those who are not. It's hard to say. But I think the case against alcohol, sadly, because, I like wine, and that is probably really outweighs any real benefit for drinking. And I also think that you're hard pressed to really find any real literature that says that drinking is good for you. Now, whether drinking really significantly is bad for you at a level, let's say less than 7 or 8 total drinks per week, one a day or something like that, I don't think there's data on that either. But as you and I both know, there's one thing that there's undeniably problematic about alcohol, and that is sleep.
Yeah, and I was going to comment on that too.
Right.
Universally, ubiquitously, it inhibits sleep efficiency.
Right.
And then think about the downstream effects from that.
Yes.
Right. So those are quantifiable. So like one other little plug is like what I get a lot in my practice is, reaching for that glass of wine at the end of the day as kind of a warm blanket. And it's like a mental cue to slow down, take a deep breath, right? And then the community aspect of it, right? You go out, you grab a drink.
Yep.
So there are ways around that, and I don't think the answer is as simple as saying, hang on to that little cue because slowing down your heart rate and relaxing is more beneficial than the harm of drinking. I think there are other ways to bring on that. And even if it's just have a tea or something.
Yeah.
Right. So I wouldn't say that drinking alcohol for the sake of the community aspect or from the relaxation aspect is enough to overcome the downsides to sleep and other problems.
Yeah. And just to be clear, we've talked about sleep. We've got disruption in sleep architecture, fragmented sleep, circadian rhythm disruption. We've specifically talked about the effects of non-REM deep sleep. And the lowering amounts of those potentially resulting in increased risks of Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
Right.
With increased risk of cancer, all these
I think
types
you
of
just
things.
Answered your own question.
Yeah. So net, as much as I wish there was like some real benefit to it, as much as I love having glass of wine, I don't really see that there is a net positive to it.
Yeah.
But then again, listen, at the end of the day, you got to live a little, have a drink, I like, I always kind of call myself the health conscious hedonist, because at the end of, I'm just not like that guy who's going to eat protein pellets and stuff like that. So it's hard. But along that lines, here, let me ask you this. So you mentioned a cup of tea, right? But there are some people who are not alcoholics, who are used to drinking one glass of wine or reach for the second can of beer. What's your take on some of these medications out there, like what is it called, disulfiram?
Oh, geez, yeah. So antabuse.
Antabuse.
Yeah. So it's a two-step process to metabolize alcohol, right? And so the first step creates a toxic metabolite. If you hold it at that, then you can make somebody so visceral, so nauseated from one glass that it creates that sort of Pavlovian.
Yeah. So you could do that. But then there's another medication too. What is the one?
You thinking of like naltrexone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, what is naltrexone?
Well, yeah, naltrexone is sort of the new buzz. It comes in multiple different concentrations, and the different concentrations have different effects on the brain. But there's low dose naltrexone, which is used actually commonly in like weight loss and addictions from that perspective. And then actual sort of higher dose naltrexone is used for alcohol, but it triggers the behavioral centers of our brain to essentially rewire addictions.
Right.
So sort of decouple was the word I would use.
Yeah. So Wellbutrin does something
Wellbutrin.
similar to that,
Yeah,
right?
and smoke cessation. And I've also used it off-label for other things too.
Yeah.
But same concept. So naltrexone is a really great way, you know, and again, in the right patient, to decrease those cravings. And then, you know, right, I mean, if you couple that with behavioral pharmacotherapy or behavioral therapy or additional pharmacotherapy, including, say, Wellbutrin, you can really hit the addictive centers of the brain that are popping dopamine out.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do use that. And again, I'm not an addiction
Right.
sort of fellowship trained or whatnot, but we see this all the time.
I mean, I think this is an interesting thing because, like, you know, with alcohol, we're so focused in the past traditionally, and like, is it a problem or not? And if it's a problem, you know, and you're an alcoholic, whatever, then you should deal with it. But if we're saying, like, if you and I are saying that, okay, moderate drinking may not be good for you either, and it may be screwing up your sleep, and people like want to reduce, you know, they say, gosh, you know, I just really would like to not have these cravings. I'm not an alcoholic, but I do drink 1 or 2 glasses of wine per night. Would that be something that you would?
I have. It's something I would, it's something I have.
Yeah.
And so think about how long it takes an addiction to wire.
Yeah.
You know, weeks, months.
Yeah.
To decouple, it's the same concept. So if you have them on something like naltrexone while they're working on it over the course of a few months, and then they step down their alcohol, again, just like any other addiction, it can be very, very effective.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too, is like, I think I heard of a couple of different things that are out there that people have used to replace. And I actually tried one of them just because it sounded like a good idea, which was the ketone body. So these drinks that are they're basically, they're full of ketone bodies, which are sort of what, you know, people who are on these high protein diets are essentially trying to, you know, they have such low blood sugar that their body starts breaking fat down,
Right,
and producing ketones. And the brain functions actually better on ketone bodies than it does sugar. So, so if you look at, say, like the, you know, people who are on the carnivore diet or something like that, they always talk about how great they feel. Part of it is because their brain is functioning extremely well. They're just full of ketone bodies, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
it makes sense.
So there's a company making something, they call it Ketonade, right? And so it's ketone bodies, and you drink them, and it's supposedly a bunch of people say they get like this sort of buzzy feeling from it. And the good thing is that it's actually kind of, you know, theoretically good for you, right? So I tried it. I ordered some. But I didn't get any buzz, and it tastes really, really bad.
It does.
Tastes really bad. But then, you know, I actually gave a can to my ex-wife, and she definitely, and she's very sensitive to stuff in general, and she's like, oh, I love this stuff. She's like, oh, I might, you know, this is great, and it's not bad for me. So there's stuff like that. I've heard of people doing, like, you know, and again, not recommending any of this stuff, but, you know, like low dose ketamine has been something, and obviously people have been microdosing, things like that, which, you know, again, there's always going to be pluses, minuses to everything, but there's other things that people can try if they really need to get out of it, including just naltrexone. So,
well, you know, one final thought on that is, you know, the kind of the patient, the client that you're referencing, the 1 to 2 per day, they tend to, from my experiences, not have these addictive tendencies. Like, you know, if there's a sort of an educational component to what we're saying, and there's less value than there is value, then I think most of your viewers could probably just swap out. But when you get to higher numbers, you're smiling, huh?
Yeah.
Challenging.
It's challenging. I think it is. Like, I mean, for me, like, you know, I've been trying, as you know, like I just, you know, the more I read about alcohol, the more it's clear to me that it's just like, man, I really like having
Yeah.
bourbon. I really like,
I know.
wine and things like that, but it's just so not good for you.
I know.
And so I have been trying to, just not have that, but I just
Yeah.
want it so badly because
Yeah.
it's just a habit.
Yeah.
It's a
I think
habit.
that's what you're getting at.
You know what?
Yeah.
So it's a psychological thing that if
Yeah.
you've, been doing for years and years and years, it's hard to just say,
Yeah,
oh,
it
yeah,
is. Habits, yeah, habits are real.
it's
I wouldn't say
Pavlovian,
no, it's true. It's
you know?
totally. I mean, we're not talking about dependency. It's not
Right.
like you get withdrawal, shake and
No,
withdrawal,
right,
right? But it's
right,
habits.
right. So anyway,
Yeah.
interesting thought. Okay,
Yeah.
next topic was,
Mm.
I actually just referenced this, but what's your take on the carnivore diet? And I don't know exactly effectively like what makes the carnivore diet besides is it just eating meat?
Yeah,
That's it?
that's my understanding.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So what's your take on it? There's a lot of people on it. I referenced the carnivore
Mm.
diet and talked about some of the things that might not be healthy about that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the posts on Instagram was talking about it, and oh my God, some people were so pissed off that I mentioned it, and they were accusing me of like, fake,
Oh,
following the
geez.
fake science, and
Yeah.
look at such and such. Apparently there's some influencers who are really, really pro carnivore diet and stuff like that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, listen, I'm not anti-meat at all. In fact, I love meat,
Yeah, I know. Agreed.
and
Yeah.
I'm just kind of looking at the
Yeah.
data and telling you that maybe
Yeah.
there's some issues. You tell me, what's your
Well, I
take
mean, I
on
can
it?
tell you my visceral response, and then there's data as
Right.
well. But visceral response is meats are naturally inflammatory. I mean, meats naturally raise your ApoB, your LDL, the particle number, right? And so there are a lot of
Is that
things.
just red meat, do you know? Or does it also include like chicken and fish?
Now,
Or,
I think lesser so,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
all contribute to
Mhm.
cholesterol synthesis, right? So, but yeah, red meats is very high inflammatory. And if you talk to a cardiologist about this too, they can give you, I mean, even anecdotal angiogram data that, red meats and specifically sort of carnivore heavy diets as compared to heavily plant-based diets, they see difference in their imaging. They see difference in their angiograms,
Mhm.
right? So, I would say to the carnivore diet person, I mean, I'm all for personalization of diet to fit your body
Yeah.
and how you feel, but don't lose sight of those objective markers.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say, okay, someone that feels great on a carnivore diet for X amount of time and they have an LDL that's 300, I wouldn't necessarily ignore that. I would say, kind of keep your head in the sand, or at least those objective markers: metabolic function, cholesterol risk, plaque risk,
Yeah.
coronary artery disease. And what are you missing in that diet? So, I mean, that's a heavily restricted diet, right?
Mhm.
So, are your antioxidants,
Yeah.
are they optimized?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, really, like we talk about heavily carbohydrate restricted diets all the time. We did a podcast on
Yeah.
it, right? I mean, we're
Yeah.
very supportive of it.
Yeah.
Restricted, I don't know if you necessarily need zero. That's kind of keto, but
Yeah.
even that has data. But if you're going to restrict other macronutrients or vitamins, whatnot, you got to find some way to bring them back in a healthy balance.
Yeah.
So if you're on a carnivore diet, are you, and you don't have any fruits, right? Are you getting these things in other ways?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
other thing that for me, like okay, and again, going back to this idea that like I was referencing this in the context of saying that people need more protein, right?
Oh, I see. I see
And
the
then,
relevance.
yeah, in more protein,
Yeah.
but saying also that, okay, but don't take that,
Yeah.
my feeling is don't take that to this extreme level on the carnivore diet,
Yeah.
because ultimately I think the data and the data on red meat and cancer in particular
Yeah.
is real.
No,
That's
it
real
is.
data.
Yeah.
And so, what do I do? Do I not eat red meat? Of course, I definitely do. In fact, I love medium rare ribeye. I love it. But I try not to do it more than like maybe eat once a week or something like that.
If that.
Yeah, if that.
Right.
I mean, that's what I do. I mean, once a week is probably my average on that. But, You know, the reality is that, you know, I think these kinds of diets make you feel good in the moment because of some biochemical thing. For example,
Sure, I
again,
agree.
you know, you're getting plenty of protein. You know,
Mm,
you're not feeling hungry.
right.
Your brain is doing great because you're, you know, in ketosis, and your
Yeah,
brain loves ketone bodies.
yeah.
But net, the question is like, what are you doing long term to your body? And that's where I worry about it. And I think, listen, if you want to do it, go for it,
Hmm.
right? But know that there's some potential implications. And I think at the end of the
Yeah,
day, that's all I'm trying to do, you
yeah.
know,
I
is
agree.
so,
We're all just
yeah,
trying to live well. And
right.
I get it. I mean, remember, I mean, if you're having an all-meat diet, you can still lose weight. There's no Bible that says you can't lose weight. It depends on
Yeah,
your calories, right? And especially if you're eating heavily chicken or lean, right? We use
right,
steak as sort of an extreme
right,
example.
right.
But if you lose weight, you can feel better, more energetic, more metabolically balanced, right? So there are things that can be favorable. But I would say don't restrict yourself of the other elements, the other sort of piece to the pie to
Yeah.
overall health and wellness, and track,
Hmm.
see what happens to your sleep, see what happens to other aspects. And high meat diets, you mentioned, you alluded to cancers
Hmm.
too, right? So we have cancer make sure you're up to speed with all your malignancy
Yep.
screens, right? I mean, there are
Yep.
definitely ways you can do this. And we experiment on ourselves all the time. I mean, it's all about
Yeah.
just finding what works for you.
Yeah.
But have your head in the sand. I mean, I think you are the same. We're not anti anything,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
think that's the thing is like my point on the Instagram resistance I got was basically the person saying, "Oh, you know, I don't want to hear about this fake science, and you probably believe in the COVID thing too, and all this." And I'm like, I don't really want
Not
to get
worth
into this.
engaging.
Basically,
Yeah,
at this point, what I'm just saying is that we're going to provide data. You know, at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell you that you
yeah,
can't or shouldn't do a carnivore diet. In fact, I don't know the answer to that. I
yeah,
just say that just know that there are risks associated with,
yeah.
you know, those kinds of diets that in the short term you may not feel, but in the long term could have significant implications. So,
I think that's
all
fair.
right, next question, another diet related question was, my daughter's a long distance runner. Is there a specific diet that's ideal for her cross country meets, the days leading up to a meet? And then what should she do on the day of the meet?
Hmm.
Good question. I don't really know the answer. How about, I
Well,
mean,
I'll tell you what I know from
yeah.
sort of the sports science, but I've actually had this conversation with a good buddy of mine who's an ultra marathon runner. He just ran a
Uh-huh.
200-mile race, right? And we actually talked about nutrition before his race.
200-mile
200
race.
mile race, right? I mean, crazy. And we're not talking about flat either. We're talking about elevation up and down hills outside of Seattle. But there are two elements here. One is glycogen, right? So when you get into distance, you need to make sure that you're refueling your glycogen, your sugar stores in your liver.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you hear about marathon runners that carb load 3 or so days before. They'll
Mm-hmm.
eat all pasta, right?
So
So
that's a thing.
it
That's a
is,
real
yeah,
thing.
carb load. So really, you want to optimize your glycogen storage before distance. What does
Mm-hmm.
distance mean? I mean, you mentioned,
Cross country. So
yeah,
yeah,
cross country is like
distance.
5K.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think for 5K, you probably just do whatever you want. I mean, there are people that roll. You could probably roll out of bed and hit a 5K.
Me? No, I didn't. It would take me about 5 years to go 5K. So
But you start getting into
yeah,
marathon
yeah.
distances
Right.
where, actually those stores matter. Number one is carb load. But the other element that a friend of mine brought up, right, which is actually very, very pertinent, is gut health while you're doing this. So he minimizes fats the day of, and he's very mindful of it the day before. So he has a ketone body drink. He'll carb load, have a ketone
Ketone
body
aid. Ketone
drink,
aid.
right? This is not even this
Does
was
he get a
complete on
buzz?
pain. I should ask him. Yeah, well, he gets his runner's high and then he gets delirious and,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
at mile 100,
Okay, so
you know.
so say it again. I'm sorry I
So I'm going to
interrupted
say,
you.
I break it down in a couple elements.
Yeah.
So number one, you carb load 3 days or so before.
Okay, so
So the day
pasta,
before.
lots of
So pasta
pasta.
white, not brown, harder to digest.
Okay.
You want to make sure your stomach is as empty and optimized as possible.
So you probably feel lousy during that too because your glycemic,
Yeah,
your insulin levels
that's
and
a
your
good
blood
point. We're
glucose.
talking about white bread. We're talking about
Yeah,
white
everything
pastas.
that we say not to eat.
It's interesting. And really, when you're going to put your body through that much trauma, the game is different. And then he also, especially with, and again, 3K is different than a marathon. This is different than 200 miles, right? But um, restoring your body an adequate protein supply. So what he does the night before is have 50-50 chicken, lean chicken for protein and muscle repair and preservation during the race. And then the carb source. And then with fiber, you want to be really careful because you don't want things jostling around and getting nauseous and sick. So remember I said you want to be mindful of your cholesterol and stuff. You want to be mindful of your fats. So heavy protein and heavy simple carbs. And then the morning of, he'll have something very light, like almost like a brat diet. Think about like brat, like we do that for gastroenteritis.
What's that remind me?
Bran rice applesauce toast.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, or yogurt with some berries. But yeah, I mean, that's the logic. And again, we talk about principles often, but if you're doing a 5K, I kind of leave that up to you. I don't, I mean, I'm not the biggest runner at all, but I don't think about carb loading when you go out for a run or whatnot. You don't carb load.
No, I don't need to. I mean, mine's like, nowhere near that kind of thing, right? Like,
that's right.
Speaking of which, though, like, okay, so I'm curious about this friend. Is this friend, how old is this friend?
He's younger than I am, late 30s, 38.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
There is this paradigm where you can exercise too much.
Oh yeah.
Right. If you're talking about longevity, like you can get into these situations where too much exercise actually, increases your risk for any number of, health issues, heart issues and all that. And so it's funny because I actually had just, I'm randomly, I just had this article that I pulled off that talks about the the Goldilocks zone. Have you ever heard of that?
What's that?
The Goldilocks zone is sort of the sweet spot for exercise for longevity, basically. And so basically the idea is at least 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity aerobic exercise, which is effectively what I do. That's that level 2 stuff, right?
Zone 2.
So if you're talking about, 30 times 5, I mean, that's 150. That's basically 30 minutes a day of level 2 for 5 days, right?
That's right.
30 minutes, 5 days a week of level 2 exercise. Or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity aerobic activity, but not more than 4 to 5 cumulative hours per week of vigorous, heart-pounding, sweat-producing exercise, especially for those over the age of 45. That's, to me, very interesting. Now, there's no cap on sort of other kinds of activity. But the fact that there's this cap is something that's of interest, I think, because a lot of people, not me, are really, really take it, 200 miles and stuff like that.
I mean, you got to think about repair. Or imagine this, or imagine you're on an all carnivore diet and you're playing this game and your glycogen is completely zero. It'd be interesting to see how someone on that diet can fare in a race like that. But it's also extremely oxidative. Like, I've actually seen this on patients that are hard athletes that I do these supplementary tests on. And, the Genova Nutrival is one test that we talked about in one of your shows. And they have oxidation scores through the roof. So the point is, I mean, if you're going to be a hard athlete, you got to think almost equally 1-to-1 about recovery as well.
Yeah.
Performance and recovery.
I think the bottom line is that there is a, like a U-shaped or, reverse J-shaped shape to this exercise thing where if you exercise to a certain extent, and it's quite a bit more than most of us will do or have time for, I mean, it's all benefit, but until you hit this point, which, is defined at least in particular paper with, 4 to 5 hours, cumulative hours per week of vigorous heart pounding, sweat producing exercise. Once you go over that you've actually got an increase in increased risk of early mortality.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's news to me. my instinct there would be diminishing returns above that, right? You kind of hit that sweet
Yeah.
spot, and then the returns get down, and then ultimately in the far
Yeah.
extreme, 3-4 standard deviations out, you have
Yeah.
mortality changes.
Yeah, much of protection. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or at
that's
least that it's
interesting.
lost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that yeah. So bottom line
Yeah.
is like it depends what you're training for, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're overtraining, then you may run into other issues as well. So
That's right.
so I guess be moderate, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. It's not moderate, but I mean it's like we're talking about you can do you're exercising a lot still. I mean, like, I've been doing probably 150 minutes, probably 200, maybe a little bit more of that of level 2 exercise. And I've been, lifting weights now a couple hours a week. This is
incredible.
basically in line with the book,
That's right.
the eating or living longer for busy people, which people can download at, the website. So, the next question here though is, this is a good one and I'd like to know this too. Where is the best place to get genetic testing for diseases? Okay, and that's one part of it. And the other question is, and what are some of the diseases you can find out about?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
So 2 parts to that. One, there is a facility that I use frequently actually at Ridley Tree. There's a genetic counseling center at Ridley Tree, which is a cancer center. So admittedly, many of the genetic counseling locations, I mean, these are usually master's level geneticists, very bright, that are extremely good at putting together complex disease patterns, right?
No, are they using like whole body DNA sequencing?
I'm not sure the modality. That's a good point. You know, what they're probably doing is, one step above 23andMe, like we're looking at genetic variants.
Yeah.
And it's when you go into certain disease processes, like even breast cancer, right? There's the BRCA.
Yeah.
But there are also other breast cancers that have multiple genetic correlations.
Right.
So you have to put it all together, kind of go back to your Punnett squares and actually give that patient an odds ratio. That's kind of what it's about. There's that element of genetic testing. And then the other element is just sort of blast the DNA with your primary care doctor or whoever, longevity clinic, and check for alleles, genetic mutations. But I can tell you the challenge there, I use that word odds ratios. Like I've done genetic testing on patients, and you can pick certain genetic mutations that are correlated, like the MTHFR gene mutation as an example, right? But the real world is extraordinarily complex. Like you have multiple genes that implicate risk. So it's not quite as simple as 23andMe and, or 3x4 genetics where you say, hey, you have a mutation that can increase your probability of blood pressure. Because you have epigenetics, you have all these other things that make it more complicated. So I'd say to answer your question, there are 2 parts. Like if you want to bring on the genetic counseling aspect of it, then find a location. Like I said, here I use Ridley Tree Genetic Counseling. And the other side of it would be to do one of those genetic test platforms.
So like 23andMe.
I mean, that's the least interesting to me. I mean, honestly, I think there are 2 that I'm very intrigued by.
Which ones do you?
Yeah. So one of them is called Intellect's DNA testing. And another one is called New Amsterdam Genomics. And when you get into like AI algorithms and like full genome sequencing, you also get very expensive.
Yeah.
So New Amsterdam Genomics is like $3,000.
Oh, is that right?
To do it, right?
Wow. And then what about the other one?
And the other one is about $2,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so presumably they're doing whole body DNA sequencing and then doing some analysis with machine learning, that kind of thing on that.
Yeah, exactly.
In my case, like it's weird because I've never had whole body genetic testing, but I've got sort of piecemealed from different things that we've done.
That's right.
That we've just randomly know. I can't even remember what those sources were.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I mean, so do you mind if I talk about your history?
No, go ahead.
Right. So the MTHFR gene mutation, right? You can check that through our local laboratory. So you can run that.
What was that? When did that pop up though? Was that in the cardio?
No, so this is what we did with you. Your homocysteine level was high. So we thought you had a problem with the methylation. And then we also validated that with a methylation panel, Genova Diagnostics. And in the methylation panel, you also swab your cheeks. And we did a whole bunch of methylation genes.
Yeah.
So there's COMT, there's MTHFR. So, that's actually what most people do. Like you do broad screening, usual screening, identify an issue, and then go down that rabbit hole. But we have patients that do the opposite. They want to blast their DNA.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a bad idea. I mean, listen, here's the thing, and just so that people understand, let me explain So I have a genetic mutation in this gene called the MTHFR gene, and that is the net effect of having that dysfunction is that it increases the level of homocysteine in the body. Increased levels of homocysteine are associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease. I mean, lots of different stuff.
Yep.
And the beauty of this was that we were able to identify that, and we have a quick solution for it. I just take a methylated B vitamin, and the problem is gone.
I know.
And this is like the perfect, this is really the perfect example of medicine 3.0, right? Is like, oh, I got this problem. And so you mean I just take this vitamin and all that problem is gone?
Yeah.
Well, that's a simple fix. And there's a lot of those little things in medicine 3.0 that you can do. Now, in this is interesting with this mutation is in 30% of the population. So this is not like a rare thing. 1 in 3 people have this that increases their homocysteine levels. And the next thing you know, they're at an increased risk. So just imagine, like if you could just go and quickly test those people, or if your levels of homocysteine are high, I guess just get on a methylated B vitamin and see what happens. It'll probably go away.
Yeah, I mean, truth be told, you're right. I mean, a lot of patients do that. They'll just take a methylated B complex, which covers all the B vitamins. B12, B9, folic acid. You can also just, Quest allows actually like self-order now. Did you know that? Like you can actually go on as a consumer and order stuff.
You can't, like anything?
Yep. As a patient.
It makes a lot of sense. Like, why would you only get to do that if you were a doctor? I mean, like, it's your own information.
I know. Right? We're all about your own body, right?
Yeah.
What you do with it, that's up to you. And you can bring that to your physician. And I hope that patients do that. But I mean, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another part to this question, which was if you found out that you had a gene that made you more likely to have Alzheimer's disease, which specifically I think we're talking about here, the ApoE4, right? ApoE4 allele that we've talked about before, which I think, I mean, what is it? It's this ridiculous number, like 80% or something.
Yeah, it's like a 3x or 3 to 4x if you have one copy. Yeah. And it's like 12x or so if you have two. And that's a pretty substantial change.
And the majority of people who end up with Alzheimer's disease do have at least one copy.
Correct.
Right. Which is true. So the question is, like, would you be able to do anything about it anyway? That's a very interesting question. And I bet you have an opinion there.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I see it in my patients, and it's actually part of my initial intake test now, my screen, because I want to know how I treat those patients.
Right.
And think about it. I mean, if you're checking that on someone who's 30 years old, 40 years old, that's not going to change. So, I mean, I want to detect it as soon as possible.
Right.
But man, I mean, it's hashtag epigenetics, right? I mean, there's a lot that we can do that can modify risk, and alcohol is a great example. And if you have this conversation with somebody at the age of 30, and say, listen, you're up here, at least statistically, we want to do everything we can to modify risk. So this is what I would exercise more. Let's sleep better, focus on cognitive health, right? I mean, there are definitely a lot of things that you can do. Stay stimulated, minimize vices, red meat, right? I mean, there are definitely things that you can do, but I would rather know as soon as possible so you can modify discussions.
I would tell you that if luckily I don't have the ApoE4, I'm just 3, like the most common APO3 and 3. But if I did have that ApoE4, that would be motivating enough for me to not drink ever again.
I think so.
Because like that unfortunately, going back to the alcohol thing again, that, as much as I enjoy my glass of wine, that's a big risk factor. And then you're talking about sleep disorder and disrupting and sleep, deep sleep and sleep fragmentation, all these things. So I would do that. I would
think about all the stuff you would do.
Yeah, I know. And then, I would take fish oils, I'd make sure I get plenty of DHA, I'd figure out every last little thing I could do. I'd go into the sauna all the time.
Yeah, that's right. I think humans are extraordinarily motivational creatures. Like we respond very well to a kick in the rear end.
Yeah. One of the strongest, I think, elements about medicine 3.0, what I've found is that it gamifies health. Okay. So So
I like that.
gamification is like one of the strongest motivators, I think, for people.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, you know, with that Aura ring, which I'm not wearing right now because a lot of times I'll just wear it to bed, you know,
Mhm.
but when I'm wearing that thing, like if I wake up and I don't have a good night's sleep, my sleep score is bad. Like I'm like, what happened? What did I do? And then
Yeah.
I'm trying to I try to go and I try to switch things up and make sure I do things differently.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge
Yeah.
difference. So if you can find, you know, find out some things that are that you have, it probably
Yeah.
you know, it'll motivate you to do some things differently. So I think
I love
that's
it, man. Well said.
okay. Now this might be one of the most interesting questions that we've had on the show, and I want to know your opinion on this as well. Is human growth hormone bad for you? A lot of people
Mhm.
say they feel great when they're on it.
At the end of your sentence?
Yeah.
Um, I would say TBD, to be determined. I mean, so here's my take on growth hormone.
Okay, what is human
Yeah.
growth hormone?
So
Let's
yeah,
back
it's a
up.
pituitary
Yeah,
hormone. It's an anterior pituitary
right.
gland hormone.
And then
Yeah.
basically it net it is involved with growth, and especially
Yeah.
in children when you're growing. If you don't have it, you know, you end up being small. If you have too much of it because you have a tumor that's secreting it, you
Hmm.
end up being like, you know, the guy on the Addams Family,
Right.
you know, Lurch.
Absolutely. Right.
Or I think Tony Robbins actually has acromegaly
I mean, he
to a
looks
certain
like he's got
extent
it,
too,
right?
right?
They're
Like,
the physical manifestation.
right.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
But yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, so it's a pituitary gland hormone that has many different end site targets on the human body to facilitate growth and development. But so it's higher levels when we're younger, right? And then the growth plates, right? So the knees and the joints, the long bones fuse, you reach your total height, and then levels come down. So it has a huge role. But what you're talking about isn't that. You're
No,
talking
I'm
about
talking about,
emergent
you know, you're a
health and
middle-aged
wellness
dude and all of a
or
sudden,
woman.
or yeah, I
Yeah.
guess women, I hear about it mostly in men because they, you know, they're the ones who are trying to like, you know, be young
Yeah.
more,
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to
Maybe.
like get buff and all that kind of stuff a lot of the
Yeah.
time. But so tell me though, first of all, like why do people feel so good when they're on growth hormone?
Oh gosh. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, and I think from a man's perspective anyway, and I can answer this for a woman as well, but if you're more muscular, right? If you have more energy, we correlate those two things to vitality, cognitive function, you feel sharper, right? I mean, so phenotypically, you just feel fabulous.
Right.
And from a woman's perspective, also, you know, it's been implicated in youth and regeneration, better skin, again, better energy. It's the holy grail.
Yeah.
We all want to, you know, not take our naps during the
Yeah.
day.
So
So
people use it
yeah,
for like when they're injured and they're healing from injuries too. I
and
mean,
actually, that's a very
there's a
common
real
way.
use there.
Yeah, right. Orthopedic injuries.
Yeah.
And you know, and orthopedic doctors tend to use it for a couple months and then pull patients off. I mean, so they go more for a sort of a pulsatile change.
Right.
But again, what we're talking about now is that middle-aged man or woman who wants vitality, longevity, and they're going to be on this for years or more.
Yeah.
So I said TBD because I think there's still more that I want to know about it. And specifically, we've had these conversations about TRT, testosterone, right? And I think it's more predictable and more trackable. So what I don't know about it is what are the long-term effects that are positive
for growth hormone.
for growth hormone. I mean, in medical school, we learned a lot of long-term effects that are negative.
That's right. And you can just go down the line on there, right? Like you
For sure. You can go down the line too, right?
You know, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what are some of the, you know, long-term negative things, or, you know, obviously, you know, there's good things, reduced body fat, cardiovascular health possibly improves.
And has that actually translated to longevity?
I don't know.
Right?
No, I don't think it has. And we'll get to that in a
agree
second,
with
which
you.
I can explain the way I look at it. But okay, so you feel great. How do you, in your patients who are on it, you have patients who are on it?
I do. Yeah.
How are their labs? Because I would think when I think about human growth hormone, I think about, the effects on increasing cortisol levels, blood sugars, and therefore blood sugars being higher,
That's
all those kinds of
exactly
things.
right.
Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I've seen patients on steady doses. Like they come in from other physicians. I've never started on a patient, and I trend all these labs. And whether it's so I see sugar problems all the time. We put CGMs on them, right? So I can't really tell if it's correlated specifically to the growth hormone or other aspects of their life. But I do see lab abnormalities. Now, I can tell you the ones that I specifically look for on growth hormone. So growth hormone targets your liver and increases IGF, insulin growth factor 1, right? That's one of the reasons why we don't check GH, because it's pulsatile. We check IGF-1.
Right.
So I do check all the metabolic markers. So I check fasting insulin, I check A1C. I usually have them on CGMs, continuous glucose monitors. So I want to see how all sort of those hormones are balanced. I'll even do DEXA scans to look at visceral adiposity on them. And that actually tends to be good, right? When you're more metabolic, you tend to not store macronutrients as adipose tissue.
Right.
And then cardiac markers. That's a big one because of the risk in the cardiac perspective.
Okay. So what?
And again, so to answer your question, so I look at LP little a, I look at apolipoprotein B, I do NMR lipo profiles on my patients.
So basically your lipid profile.
Yeah. And I make sure they're holding steady.
Okay. So do you see, I mean, maybe you just don't have a big enough sample size.
I see your point. I mean, if I started patients on it, I could see that delta.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when they come in, I just see where they're at. And what do I do if they're at it? You have two options. You can withdraw them from the growth hormone, or more likely, you treat the problem. And so I do that. I generally don't dabble with it. And I tell them that, hey, this is something that I would kind of use in a gray zone. If you want to continue it, have at it.
Yeah.
And I'll keep an eye on some of the things that I can keep an eye on. And it may or may not be correlated to what I'm seeing.
Let me give you my take on it. And I mean, just from, I'm not practicing. I'm theoretical and thinking about this stuff. But the issue to me is that when you've got, you mentioned that really IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, is essentially your marker for growth hormone. What you can uniformly do is see that high IGF-1 levels are correlated with high mTOR levels, right? So mTOR being the mammalian target of rapamycin.
Sure.
One of probably the most recognized longevity pathway. We know that rapamycin has this benefit by downregulating the activity of mTOR, right?
Yeah.
So IGF goes up when human growth hormone goes up, and so does mTOR activity, which is not
counterproductive.
That's counterproductive for longevity.
Yeah.
So theoretically, that's problematic. In other words, you might feel great right now, but theoretically, it would be negative in terms of longevity. Now, that may not be important to you, but that's just something that, that's worth noting. The other thing, though, that I think is really interesting is I actually have tried to look up data, clinical data, that was like human growth hormone is bad for you and you're likely to die earlier and stuff like that. I can't find anything. I cannot find anything that says that it is clearly a bad idea. Like a lot of the things we've talked about, increasing, cortisone levels and all these things that we're talking about, they are, I don't know, not really seeing them necessarily in the literature either. Like I'm not seeing those comparison numbers.
Yeah.
Maybe they're there, maybe they're not. I could just say from the theoretical end, it would seem to decrease longevity, but we don't have any clinical data necessarily showing that. So net, what do you do? If you feel great on it, whatever, do you just go for it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
what's your,
when I tend to have a net kind of situation like this, especially one
do
it. That's kind of exactly, that's how I think. But again, I'm more on the conservative side.
Right.
The other thing is, this is a little bit different than testosterone, and honestly different than rapamycin also, right? Think about a very like your stakes are very high. You have a therapeutic index that's rather narrow. We don't know how to monitor these things necessarily well. I think it's intriguing, and I would say I would love to read more about it, and it's on my radar. But when I kind of hit that net question, I tend to step back and observe. It's just how I do things.
Yeah. I'm surprised nobody's studying this.
Yeah, I'm
Because,
surprised too.
especially as people this whole longevity space, it
Yeah,
just seems like a question that a lot of people would like to know the answers about, or at least have
yeah,
more data about,
yeah.
you
I'm
know?
with you. Or at least on rodents, right? I mean, ITP study, like put in some of these hormone variables, human growth hormone. I will say though, peptides is an interesting thing, and there are peptides out there that stimulate growth hormone, at least theoretically.
Like which ones?
Well, sermorelin is one.
Sermorelin, right?
Yeah, that's
Right.
one, and there are other ones too. But what intrigues me about them is the higher up you get in the brain, the more you lose your regulatory brakes, right?
Mhm.
So if you're going to give somebody something that stimulates growth hormone, you still have all these checks and balances and cytokines and things like that that can kind of protect you from negativity. And if you give somebody a pituitary gland hormone and you just give it to them and you're not trending these things, you're not tracking it, you're going to have a lot of downstream effects.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued by peptides as well, and I think they might be a little bit safer.
So I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
this is not something that you know that much about, but so Sermorelin is it Sermorelin? How do you pronounce that?
Well, I say
know?
sermorelin.
Sermorelin?
Yeah.
It's SEMOR.
Sermorelin, sermorelin.
Okay, Sermorelin. It
I
sounds
could
good
be
that way.
wrong, but it sounds
Sermorelin.
slick, right?
Sounds Italian.
Yeah.
Okay, well, okay,
Yeah.
so what it's a peptide, and
Yeah.
peptide is basically just a string of amino acids, a small protein.
It is what it sounds like.
So do we know what is it does it look like, is it hitting growth hormone receptors? So it's a mimetic?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, mimetic, but how it hits its receptors, and does it go right to the enzymatic pocket, or does it influence something else that goes into that enzymatic pocket? Right. I mean, this gets extraordinarily complex, and I don't know the answer to that. It's actually very easy to find out. I don't know if it really matters, but the concept.
Well, it could matter though, because if you're talking about growth hormone, and one of the reasons that you don't want to give it is that you're affecting that pituitary axis. Presumably, if sermorelin, if it is a mimetic, it's going to downregulate that pathway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well,
right?
That's true. I see your point. I mean,
Right.
So you can also say the same thing about things that influence testosterone or Brazilian nuts and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But and again, conceptually in the human body, if you have more checks and balances, that homeostasis tends to hold.
Yeah.
So I think that's more of the concept. And think about it, like when you give somebody that I'll use testosterone as an example. You give something that can boost testosterone, it
shrink your testes.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's true for anything you give.
Testes.
Yeah. And the reason why is because of the feedback loop that comes to your testicles. You don't have to produce it anymore, right?
Right.
But if you're going to give somebody the actual hormone itself, the actual hormone, growth hormone, IGF, whatever, or testosterone, you break those checks and balances, and your body tends to downregulate other stuff to try to compensate. It freaks out, but you lose those breaks. So like in internal medicine, I think about breaks a lot because, again, we have to be somewhat conservative.
Yeah, yeah. So does sermorelin affect IGF levels?
Yeah.
So, okay, so it looks analogous to...
Yeah, and I've used sermorelin previously, and one of the baseline labs that I do is IGF, because the rule of thumb for growth hormone or IGF, or if you have acromegaly or if you have a pituitary tumor, do not use these things. If you have active malignancy, do not use these things.
Yeah, yeah.
So
that's a very good point, because the one thing that we didn't mention about is that probably one of the risks here is that if you do have like an early cancer or something like that, theoretically the growth hormone would kick that baby up and get it, so it may promote cancer. So your body is not always, but frequently encountering small cancer cells. Your immune system takes care of those. But if you have some kind of, turbo boosting thing here, like growth hormone, you could end up, really kind of putting that balance out of whack, and presumably increase your risk for cancers. But I don't even know if that data is out there, though.
I don't know. I mean, I get it. We're talking conceptually, but that's kind of, what we do. And you try to break down pathways. And I think what you said about mTOR is compelling. I mean, my take home on this would be just hang tight a little bit longer and let's collect some information.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting too, is I think the data that comes from animal models is tricky too to understand too, because usually they're giving it to them, you know, throughout their life. So we're not really talking about that though. What we're talking about is, you know, intervening at midlife. And does it, you know, that's a different question than giving it throughout a life.
Yeah, very different.
Right.
And think about that. Like if you're going to use rodent models, you're going to use Drosophila, you're going to use whatever, and you're going to pulse them with growth hormone. You know, you're absolutely right. This is extremely different. And there are studies on giving growth hormone to those with pituitary tumors that were removed and were replaced in something that was deficient. It's a whole different question than to give it something when it's not deficient.
Right.
So yeah, it's harder to study. It's hard. Imagine trying to set up that study on rodents. Are you going to start it at, you know, midlife on them? And what qualifies as midlife? What dose
they did that in the taurine studies. That's what they did.
That's right.
And I think a middle-aged mouse is what, 6 months old or 7 months old or something.
I didn't want to burn myself by giving a number.
Yeah,
but you might be right.
I'll burn myself. It's fine. I'd burn for you, but yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, I would say more to come.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much all I got today, man. And you know, I appreciate you taking the time coming out. It's always, you know, nice to sort of back up and not just have pure content, but discussion. Yeah. And I think people get a lot out of this, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, my friend. I love coming over here anytime.
Yeah. We'll see you around.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for listening to Sapio with Buck Joffrey. A quick reminder that while I am, in fact, a surgeon, nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. Now, make sure to include your physician in any medical decisions you make. And also, if you're enjoying the show, please make sure to show your support with a like, share, or subscribe. Until next time, this is Buck Joffrey for Sapio with Buck Joffrey.